Hello, my name's Steve and welcome to the Seaside Allotment channel, and today we're doing a quick kind of review of the year in terms of just highlights and lowlights. And I'm going to do another video where I'm going to go through the kind of month by month the big things really that happened during the year. But we'll just start off with the highlights. Right, so let's talk about the real highlight. What was the best crops of the year? So I think, in terms of value, it's got to be the leafy greens. It's got to be the lettuces, the spinach, the New Zealand spinach. They've just been amazing, and they probably represent maybe 30% of the value of the crops that we harvested, and they took up, a tiny fraction of the land. I mean, we grow probably 100, I think it's about 160 different types of fruit and veg, but those probably 5 or 6 leafy greens, are huge, like probably £2,500 worth of harvest from those. So that's just amazing. Really, really happy with the leafy greens. In terms of taste, I think, I did a bit of a survey of people, and the sweet corn was, the absolute top of the crop, basically. Everybody just absolutely raved about the sweet corn this year. Really amazing. My personal pick, really, is spring onions, which is a crazy thing really, but for me they're just the thing that just tastes absolutely so much better than anything you can get in the shops. Yeah, and we really love spring onions in the salad mixes, and so that's got to be one of those. And then the best new crop, I think, of the year has got to be the trumpettinos. There's these really long, kind of slender squash plants, a bit like a butternut squash, but they're much more nutritious than a butternut squash. We've had a much better harvest of them than a butternut squash, and they're just more versatile. They're just a fantastic kind of summer squash, and then if you leave them to mature, they're a fantastic winter squash. So just being the star of the show, and we've grown those in the polytunnel. We're going to grow more in the polytunnel next year, but we're also going to grow some outside. So yeah, so that's harvests, highlights. So what about the lowlights? Well, the biggest failure has got to be the butternut squash. I mean, we basically got, what was it? Probably about 3 or 4 butternut squash, something like that, off 4 plants. I mean, it was just a phenomenally bad harvest. A real true disaster. None of the squash was brilliant, but Crown Prince was by far the best. Second one, was the sprouts. Now, I'm not so bothered about sprouts because, I'm not a massive fan of sprouts, but basically we lost our whole early and summer planting of sprouts. The whole lot, every single plant died. Now, we're not really sure of the reason. It could have been the heat. It could have been, I put it down originally to cabbage root fly, because when I took the plants up, there was basically no roots left on them. And it may just possibly have been the roots just rotting away. And maybe that was just because we overwatered the holes before we planted them because of the drought. I'm not sure. Anyway, hoping for better things. Now, we have actually got some sprouts, because we got some late sprouts that we planted in September time. And we actually got some sprouts on those, and some friends of ours have given us some sprouts as well, so we're not totally depleted of sprouts. And pest-wise, the worst crops just got to be the brassicas in general, because we just suffered so badly from cabbage aphid and whitefly. Just, horrendous really. And I've never seen anything like it. I mean, we always have some whitefly, I mean, everybody does, but yeah, just those two things just really caused big problems with pretty much all of the brassicas, especially later on in the season. So what would I do differently? Now, this is an interesting question. I've been kind of mulling this over, maybe even for 2 years now, thinking about it, and it just seems to me that I've put a lot of emphasis on growing for winter. And that makes sense, because obviously it's hard to grow and be self-sufficient in veg during the winter. So it makes sense to have a lot in the ground for that time. And in fact, you do need a lot of beds dedicated to winter in order to have enough food to get you through the whole winter. So it makes sense. But when I look at my numbers, it's pretty obvious that actually we only harvest over winter maybe let's say £60 a month worth of veg, so roughly £200 worth of veg or something in winter. But in early spring we harvest probably £1,500 worth of veg. So it's a massive difference, like almost 10 times more in early spring than in winter. Now if we prepared more beds to maximise yield in early spring, rather than have those beds dedicated to feeding us in winter, wouldn't make much difference to the winter yield, maybe £10 less or something like that, but maybe we could add £500 worth of extra crop in spring. So that's what I'm going to be doing partly this year, but definitely next year. I'm just going to turn my attention to thinking, what can I do in August, September and October, not to maximise November, December and January, but to maximise February, March and April. And that's a kind of just slightly shifting my focus. It doesn't really change the way I've designed the allotment at all. It just changes my planting plans a little bit, and and the way that I manage the crops and things like that. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how well I've done this year on that, and then compare that to next year and the year after. So now we come on to some broader challenges. So the first one is, what's the biggest challenge on the allotment, the site related issues? And without a doubt that was the decision by the council and the allotment committee to switch the water on late in April. And when they switched it on late, they found that there were leaks, and then it took quite a long time, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, to fix those leaks. And so we actually only got water at the end of April, and I was not prepared for that. As I said, we're picking probably £800, so £200 a week's worth of veg in April. All the beds are still under cover because still pretty bad weather, and they need watering, and they need a lot of water, and so I ran out of water in the middle of April, and it was pretty traumatic. Well, it wasn't really traumatic, but it was a difficult time. Lots of water having to be brought from home, just a pain basically. Obviously we wash all the veg on site, so all the water for washing we had to bring onto the site. About half of the water for watering the beds we had to bring on. So that was quite difficult, and we fixed that problem. So we've now got more water storage and water capture capacity, and so we're not dependent now on the allotment water supply in the early months. And the same thing happened in autumn. They decided to save a bit of money and switch the water off at the beginning the beginning of October rather than the end of October, which had been the tradition. And as a result of that, again, we nearly ran out of water, and similarly we fixed that problem. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, but in a way it's the challenges that stimulate you to fix underlying weaknesses basically in the infrastructure that we've got, and a kind of unhealthy risk that we had on decisions that the town council and the committee, quite rightly, it's their call to make those decisions. They can't run the site just for my convenience, and so if I've got that exposure, that risk, it's mine to fix, so I fixed it. So then the kind of biggest weather challenge, well, without a doubt, that was the beast from the east, and that really knocked things back for me, and we lost quite a lot of things. So we lost quite a few trees, a lot of blueberry bushes, some raspberries, quite a lot of strawberries, and some of the beds, they really suffered, and we lost several £100 worth of potential harvest. So there's nothing you can do about that. But the kind of secondary one, kind of counterbalance to that, of course, was just the drought. We had a quarter, I think, of average rainfall from April all the way through to November, and just it's unheard of basically. I mean, everybody had drought all over the country, but here it was horrendous. And fortunately, we were very fortunate that the water company didn't switch you know, they didn't impose a hosepipe ban, and even when they were planning to impose a hosepipe ban, they exempted allotments from that. We, however, were being strongly encouraged by the allotment, by the town council, not to use a hosepipe, and so we didn't. We only watered by hand. We did fill the water butts up with a hosepipe, but you know, that was allowed. And what I learnt from that, though, was that it's actually better to water by hand than by a hosepipe. It's actually quicker. You know how much water you're putting down. You know, you can be more targeted in the way you water. It's just, you know, it's just generally, and you get a bit of exercise while you're doing it, so that was not too bad. And the heat, of course, was also difficult to cope with. And again, you know, we learned from that. And this is the first time having the polytunnel. We learned how to manage the heat in the polytunnel better. We've used lots more shade cloths on the beds because we've got coal frames everywhere and little hoop tunnels. We can lay shade cloth over those. And that was really good for the lettuces and the spinach, and you know, starting new seeds. And we learned, you know, how to start carrots in the summer, you know, when it's really hot and things like that. So it was generally just a learning experience, but it was a challenge. And again, all challenges make you stronger. So on to a kind of challenge that's all my fault. We ran out of salads in, we didn't totally run out, but we almost ran out of salads in August and September. And there were two kind of contributory factors to that. One was a little bit out of my control, which is that we got quite an infestation of, I can't remember what it's called now, it's some sort of grub. But anyway, it's a moth that lays its eggs in the soil, cutworms. And yeah, they just worked through the salad beds, basically. Just, you know, we'd come in one day and one salad would be cut, and then the next day, second salad was dead, and then the next day, the third salad was dead. And in the end, we watered the beds with a nematode that kills the cutworm, and you know, we saved maybe 2/3 of the salad beds. But yeah, that was just really discouraging to keep coming in and finding all these salads all wilted and died. And then the second one was that I just didn't pay enough attention to maintaining the salad supply in August and September. And you know, I didn't plant enough radishes, I didn't plant enough purslane, I didn't plant enough true spinach, and I didn't plant enough lettuces. I just kind of neglected, was so busy with watering, everything was so abundant in kind of May, June and July, I just didn't feel the need to plant as much as I should have done. And I didn't take beds out when I, you know, a little bit early like I should have done, and get new plants in that were going to take over. And as a result, you know, we only just made it through. You know, we could have picked a lot, we had a lot more people who wanted salad than we could supply. And, you know, that was just a real shame, because, you know, we love, you know, we've got a lot of friends and family that we feed, and, you know, it's just a shame, you know, that they're having to go to the supermarket to get stuff when, you know, we could be growing it for free. And yeah, so that was a shame. And you know, it actually happened the year before, and I tried to do something about it, but I failed. And just to contribute to that, I did kind of have a little bit of a disaster in terms of the new seedlings, and I had three problems actually. So I had a batch of seedlings in July, when we were on holiday in July, and my daughter Jennie was watering those, and it was just one of those days where the temperature just went absolutely crazy that day, you know, and it had been maybe say 28 and it went to 32 or something like that, and she watered in the morning, but she didn't water until the following morning, and by then the whole batch of salad plants was dead. And then I got another batch of salads to replace that lot, and they were up against the garage in shade, so they were getting early morning sun, but during the, you know, the real heat wave, they were in shade of the garage, and we had a really bad rainstorm just a freak thing, only laid down probably 5 mm of water, but it all poured off the garage roof and it went straight down into these trays, and we lost about a third of the salads. They just got washed away by the dripping water, so that was bad. And then the third one, the one that really hit us, and we're still living with the fallout of this, is that we got a full bag of it was a Westland compost, seed compost, and it just nothing grew in it. I mean, things germinated, and then they just stopped growing. They just didn't grow at all. And for all the way through August, I was just thinking, well, so, they must be slow, these, for some reason. And we were away for quite a lot of August, and so I didn't really realise just how slow these things were growing. Anyway, when I kind of looked at September, and I looked back at some of the videos, I was thinking, what's going on here? Same planting dates, and these things were tiny, like little tiny seedlings like this, and then same seeds planted last year at the same time, like this sort of size, or being that sort of size. So they just weren't growing, and they didn't grow through September, and so I started transplanting them into bigger pots, and they grew away like crazy. And so I had to start planting these tiny little, literally like this big, like little tiny immature things in either big pots or into the ground, and then they started growing. But it really just put us back a whole month, and we've never fully recovered from that, because a month in September is an eternity, basically. So if you're planting something immature, it's and we've got beds out there now that have just not, they're just not matured, and we've taken a tiny harvest on them. Now, ironically, that means that we've got a lot of beds that are full of immature lettuces, which should do really well in spring next year. So that's kind of part of my unintentional part of that experiment, to kind of focus a little bit more on spring. So we'll see how that goes. So what we're going to do next year. So this isn't a challenge. Well, I suppose it is a challenge. So the challenge that I've set myself is to harvest £10,000 worth of veg. We harvested £7,000 this year. But over the years, we've had allotments now for 3 years. We've been putting more and more investment into the plots. And obviously we're reaping those rewards in subsequent years, and so we've continued to put a lot of investment in this year, and in the previous year. So we've got a lot more trees. I've more than doubled the number of trees that we've got. We've got a lot more bushes, fruit bushes. We've got a lot more raised beds with soft fruit like strawberries. We've got kiwi plants, we've got all sorts of things. We've grown lots more varieties than we grew before, so just to enrich the diet, but also to provide a bit more resilience against things going wrong. Obviously we're better, we're learning, we've got a better supply of water, and yeah, so we're hoping we'll get to 10,000. So what else are we doing? Well, we're growing a lot more herbs. So we're gradually transitioning Debbie's plot primarily over to perennial crop. So there's lots of fruit, lots of herbs, perennial kales, all manner of, loads of fruit trees, loads of berries. It's going to be a beautiful plot. It's already lovely. It just gets better and better. So we just that's generally it. So we're going to grow more. We're looking to reduce our workload whilst growing more. We're going to use less water, tap water, than we've ever used before. We're going to go much more in terms of varieties. We're going to give a little bit more attention to brassica successions, because we kind of always in the habit of just planting all the brassicas in April and just sort of leaving them to it. And obviously there's a lot more to that, which we didn't really appreciate, but we appreciate now. So lots of different different varieties of cauliflowers planted at different times of year, lots of different colours of cauliflowers, lots of different types of broccoli and broccolini and calabrese, all to suit the different times of year. Different varieties of beetroot, different varieties of carrots. Just sort of more varieties, more intensively grown. yeah, so just, and say less work, so you know, can't get better than that really. So there's kind of meme going around at the moment, asking people, you know, who they're inspired by, and you know, at this point this year, I'm really inspired by Richard Perkins and Mike Hurdis. So, you know, Mike's just, you know, he is my allotment inspiration, and that's for a few reasons. I mean, one is he just makes it all look so effortless, and I just love that. You know, I mean, there's plenty of gardeners that do a good job, but Mike does a good job, and he goes on holiday for 3 months a year, and he's got a full-time job, you know, and a demanding job at that, and he still manages to outgrow me, you know, and I'm retired, so it's just, you know, amazing, you know, amazing what he achieves, and he just, you know, it just seems so easy to him, it just comes so naturally. So yeah, that's consistently inspiring, and the quality of his veg is amazing, and you know, it's yeah, it's just a joy to behold. And then Richard Perkins, well, he is kind of my lifestyle inspiration. If I was 20 years younger, I'd probably be buying a small holding and you know, just living the sort of life that Richard Perkins lives. And you know, recently, you know, he's become a little bit even more inspiring, because he's recognised that, you know, he's getting older, he can't work at the rate that he previously worked, and so he's having to farm smarter and not just better, you know. So previously he was just trying to do everything, and he was burning out, and now he's kind of, you know, taking a good look at his life, and getting a nice balanced lifestyle, and still, you know, managing to be an inspiration in terms of his livestock and his market gardening, and he's just, you know, his kind of custodial approach that he takes to the environment, and you know, and enhancing it through his permaculture practices and things like that. So yeah, those are my two inspirations, and I've said before, you know, that Nigel from the Muddy Boots channel is kind of my reference point for the kind of how to do kind of gardening, you know, so how to plant seeds, how to plant, you know, how to dry onions, how to do whatever, you know, he's got all of that really dialed in. I tend to take a bit more rough and ready approach than Nigel, but you know, he's a constant reminder as to how to do things right, and so, you know, I'm, you know, tremendously grateful for everything that I've learned from him. So anyway, hopefully that's quite a long video that was intended to be a short one, but just me sitting here rambling, and hopefully you enjoyed it anyway, and I'll see you soon.